Okay, folks, this is my run-through for you of the Metacognition Lab. It should be a printable or openable in Word for people that have accessed it on Blackboard. And this is going to be a remote lab, apparently for everybody, I think. Maybe not. But for the people that have to do it remotely, this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to walk you through it. So you need either a physical copy of this that you can write on, or a virtual copy that you can write on the screen. Now there is part two there because it's printed sideways and then printed this way. Is that I have paper copies back to back for this that are separate, but each one of these is a separate download on the Blackboard. So you may have to open 3 different Word windows in order to do this in Word. It should still work. Tell you the truth, I haven't actually done this, tried to do it, so let's hope. So, as I said, I'm going to walk you through this. Typically, this would be a class participation lab to a large extent, but a lot of times it would just be people raising their hands, and we would see how many people in a room fall into different categories. I do always start with a little bit of an introduction. This is about a lab about how your brain processes information, and I've added a couple of things to how I do the lab that I haven't actually added to the paper printout part of the lab itself. That is, I always start by talking about a couple of issues that people have, especially coming into a college classroom. But they're issues that you have, not just in college classroom, but all over the place. And I like to address them because, well, you'll figure it out as I go through them. The first one is what they call imposter syndrome. And being in a science class, if you're not really hot to be in a science class, or being in college, if you're new to college, or I'll tell you, being anywhere, doing anything, it is a very, very common feeling to have where in your heart of hearts, you're thinking, I don't belong here. I don't really know what I'm doing. All these people around me seem to be much more clued in to what's happening. And if they found out how little I knew of what was going on, they would laugh at me, and it would be really embarrassing. Here's the dirty little secret. Everybody has that. Is that I had that trying to put all this stuff together and figuring out the technology that I needed to try to recreate my class online as much as I could. I still haven't dipped into how to do all the markings in Blackboard. And here's the thing, is that when you have that feeling, it's real easy to put stuff off until you absolutely have to do it. Then you can't necessarily do as good a job. Now I am gonna have dipped into all that stuff well before we get to the semester. It's only about the second week of August when I'm doing this. But I know the feeling of, woo, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Is that you do that when you get a new job, you do that when you get a promotion, all over the place in the world. Is that you're gonna have this feeling of, I feel this way and I'm unique. Is nobody else in this situation would be feeling this way. Everybody feels that way. The next thing is kind of related. Because you don't have necessarily a lot of confidence, it's real easy to look at you go, oh, okay, I know what he wants in terms of this assignment. And then you actually sit down with it and you go, maybe I don't know for sure what he wants. Here's a clue. You should ask if you don't know. But don't do what everybody wants to do, which is what I'm doing with the mark thing right now, which is put it off and put it off and put it off and put it off until you're looking in your rearview mirror at, oh, that was due last week. And I still don't feel, you sit down and you stare at it and you stare at the directions. And rather than just jumping in, which is really what you got to do, you just don't do it. And of course, you don't do it, you're definitely going to fail the assignment. If you do it, you may fail the assignment, but you'll get some points out of it, and you'll learn some stuff that will help you do the next go round. Virtually all of my stuff, you got to do a few of, and the first one's going to be tricky, and the second one's going to be easier. And by the time you're doing the last one, you're thinking, I don't know why I thought this was ever difficult, now that I kind of know the tricks. But you gotta do it. Is that putting it off until and then it's behind you and you go, well, he doesn't, I'll take stuff late, loses some points being late, but I'll take it late. Is that just get it done and add to that point total that you want going through the semester. Okay, that's my introductory part. I'm going to walk you through the different parts of the lab and probably split the video up into different parts. Part one has to do with how we absorb information, what they call learning types. And it's split into 4 groups. Very rarely is a human being all in one group and 0 in the other groups. But it's very common to have 2 groups that you kind of fall into and 2 groups that you really don't fall into. So you want to read through the paragraphs here because I'm just going to be paraphrasing. I'm not going to be reading them. And I'm going to leave stuff out. So you should read each of the paragraphs that describes each learning type. And you'll notice after each question it goes, what aspects of this do you feel apply to you? And if none of them do, write that down. Here's one of the rules for the lab. Answer all the questions. If you answer a question wrong, you lose a point. If you just leave it blank, you're gonna lose 2 points. I'd at least like you to take a shot. Here, it's easy. I don't ask for full sentences. The questions are just about you, and so as long as you answer, I won't know whether there's not really a right or wrong here. But wrong is not answering any, leaving it blank. First group, the organizers. The organizers are kind of in control of this right now because we're on my side of this screen, we're being very, very, very pushed to be very structured in our approach because the organizers, the computer people, are the ones that are kind of telling us how to do stuff. And here's a little secret about organizers. These are people that are very, very structured. They have a lot of structure to their lives. And now I'm not an organizer. I understand the appeal. I understand how it works for them. People that are organizers look at folks like me that they kind of see as chaotic and unstructured and go, we don't understand how you can get anything done. You need to be doing it our way. I don't look at structured people and say, you need to be doing it my way. But that's because I kind of understand their approach. Sometimes I have to use their approach. But they never really feel like they need to do things chaotically. So if you're like me, you're not a terribly structured person. People come and go, how do you ever find anything here? And you go, well, I know where it is. But you don't have an you don't have a system for every single thing that you've got stored. Then you're not an organizer. But if you are an organizer, certain types of classes, certain types of material appeal to you. Things that have structure. And classes that are presented with a lot of structure. Bosses that give you a lot of structure works for you. And that's the reason why I think it's a good idea that we give you all these different approaches in college classrooms so that it does kind of prepare you for the variety of folks you're going to run into in the world. Is that structured people like structured classes, they like structured tests, and the question you're going to get is, so what aspects of this apply to you? And if it's none, then say none. The second group, going on to the second group, they're called the storytellers. Storytellers are learn by example people. So yeah, they very often connect information to stories that they've heard or stories that they construct in their head, and that's where the word comes from. But these are also the people that, if you're not a storyteller, you may have taken a math class where there was lots and lots and lots of homework, and you were doing the same thing 15 different ways, and thinking, I understand this. Why do I have to do all of this homework? Well, storytellers, those examples are how they're going to learn. Is that doing it a bunch of different ways kind of firms in their head just exactly how things get done. I tend to remember a lot of biology by connecting it to stories. You'll notice that in my lectures. Is that my lectures pull stories in from all over because that's how the information sinks into my brain better. But not everybody thinks or learns that way. So again, the question is, what applies to you, what doesn't apply to you. The third group are called the contrast students, and they have a feature that sets them apart from the other three, typically. Typically, the other three groups, when you're learning something new, you're looking for connections. You're looking for, okay, if I want to figure out how this new stuff works, I need to understand how it works in context of the stuff I already know. How does this connect to the stuff we did last week? Contrast students come at it the other way. They want to see how new stuff is different from the stuff they already know. They like to see the edges of things and the separations and the contrasts. That's where the name comes from, of new information. There's a very good chance, if you're taking this and you're in college, you're not a contrast student. Not a lot of them survive the lower levels. And you have to think back. You've run into these people in elementary school and middle school. And these are the kids that in elementary school, you'd be dealing with something and they'd ask a question and you'd look at them and go, that's not what we're talking about. Because your mind doesn't work like a contrast student's. You don't realize that they're coming in from the differences. And so their answers don't necessarily, I don't want to say connect, but they don't jive with people that think otherwise. Here's the problem. They often get treated like they weren't paying attention, or that maybe they're not too bright, or that maybe they're making trouble. Some teachers go, that's not a serious question. And the reason you have to go back to elementary school to remember this is because pretty quickly they learn not to ask questions. And a lot of them start to feel themselves that they're not too bright. And this has nothing to do with intelligence. You can be hugely intelligent in all of these groups. It's just a different way of learning. And it isn't terribly compatible with typical classrooms. And think about this. The teachers you had in elementary school were college graduates. It's unusual for these people to make it to college. They usually wind up out in the world being artists, or there's all sorts of things that contrast students are really great at, a lot of areas that attract them. But they don't typically feel comfortable academically, so they very often, when they get to the end of high school, they're done with it. They don't want it. It's too much of a problem for them. And if you are really a strong contrast student, you know that there's an issue with, you have to kind of relearn everything, because nothing is taught compatible with the way you learn. Is that, but if you understand what's going on in your brain, you say, oh, okay, they're giving me the connections. I need to figure the differences out on my own, and then it will all make sense to me. That's a very valuable thing. And one of the reasons I like to hammer this is, I have not seen any connection that this is genetic, that these learning styles are particularly genetic. So it's quite possible for two people that are not contrast students to have kids that are. And it's good to know about this so that you can help them through it and help them understand why they have these issues that the kids around them don't seem to have. It really makes them feel, I mean, they are different, but they're not stupid different. A lot of times they feel stupid different, and that's a really bad thing. Last group, overview students. I'm an overview student. Overview students, if you want me to learn the details, feed me the big picture first, and then tell me how the details fit into the big picture, and I can learn the details. Organizers, exactly the opposite. Throw a bunch of details at them, and eventually the big picture starts to come into focus for them. They kind of construct the big picture from the details on their own. So you'll notice when I'm teaching my lectures, I start with the concepts and work to the details. If you're an organizer, that may be the exact opposite of what works for you. You may need to go and, I don't really understand this. And just go and look at the details and go, oh, okay, now that makes sense. But you have to kind of reverse it a little bit. So those are the 4 learning styles. As I said, read the paragraphs. There's more in the thing than that. And you do get additional questions. Question 5 has to do with, how does the person up here, how do our learning styles connect to how we're going to teach? And that should be pretty obvious. I've already talked about it in terms of me. But this is something you got to think about. If you've got a pretty good idea of what your learning styles are, then the person that's teaching you, they may not be compatible with you. And it's really good to be able to recognize that, because it's going to be a little bit more work for you. But it also may tell you why your buddy's not having any trouble at all and you are, because your buddy's got a different learning style than you do, and it's more compatible with the class you're taking. And then the last question in part one is the important one. How do you figure it out when you're new to a class? Is that within the first couple of weeks, it could be really valuable to know what this person's approach is and whether it's going to be an easy run for you or it's going to be a slog through the swamp for you. And what do you look for? You know, what are the clues that they're going to give you that's going to kind of clue you into what the learning style is of the person that's teaching the class? Okay, that's part one.